Hey guys, welcome to the video! Today we'll be going over basically everything you'll need to start modding Spider-Man PC, as well as all the knowledge I've gathered since I started. I never thought I'd be doing tutorial videos, but I felt that this was needed and long overdue. Please note that some information might be gone over kind of fast. It's either to save time or because I'll go more in depth about it later. And, of course, feel free to go back and forth. I'll do my best to make timestamps for the video as well. So, let's get started. First thing you'll need is the Spider-Man PC modding tool. You can find that over at Nexus Mods, and I will also leave links to everything I can in the description. In order to get the tool working, you'll need to direct it to your game's asset archive. For example, since I'm on Steam, I'll find my game, right-click and browse local files. Then you should see your game's asset archive folder. If this is your first time using this tool, that's the folder you'll need to direct it to when it asks for your asset archive. Also, for this tutorial, I highly recommend downloading the SMPC tool tweak as well. Now that we have that settled, you have pretty much all the game's assets to your disposal. Let's say I want to mess around with a suit that's in the game. First, I'll navigate to the G00S001 section on the left, click the plus, open characters, then hero. Now you'll see the models for Spidey's in-game suits, as well as their base textures. If you want to extract the model, right-click and hit Extract Asset. I highly recommend making a dedicated folder for your models and textures, by the way. We'll touch on textures in a bit. Now I'm sure you're wondering what to do with the model you just extracted. We're gonna need a funny little tool called a GUI Wrapper. If I can't find links for these tools, then I'll just point out where to find them in the Discord. And if anything, I'll leave a link to my Google Drive with all the tools I use in the description. Now once you have the GUI Wrapper installed, try to open it up. If it says something about a virus or whatever, don't worry about it. It's a false positive. Now tell Windows to run it away, and boom, you'll see two tabs, .model to .ASCII and .ASCII to model. What's an ASCII, you ask? An ASCII is basically a file format that lets you import your models into a 3D modeling software. Blender will be your go-to software for any models, and it's free. So go get that and then come back. You're back? Okay, good. So in the first tab of the GUI Wrapper tool, hit the Browse button and select your model wherever you extracted it to, then hit Convert. Now, you have an ASCII of said model. But there's one more thing we'll need related to Blender. We will need a funny little plugin called XNALara. This basically allows you to import ASCIIs into Blender. Link in description, hopefully. Oh, but how do I install plugins, you ask? Open up Blender, hit the Edit tab at the top left, then Preferences, Add-ons, and then Install. Make sure the plugin pops up and check it so it's enabled. Now to finally get your model into Blender, hit File, Import, scroll down to XNALara, XPS. Select the first option, then find ASCII wherever it is, and hit Import. And now boom, you've imported a model into Blender. This is by no means a tutorial on how to 3D model, but I will, however, give some basic examples how to do things properly. On the right, you should see your model's file name and its armature. What's an armature? It's basically the skeleton of the model. Now click the little arrow next to armature, and you'll a bunch of stuff starting with SM. These are basically all the meshes, or parts, of the model in numbered order. This will be very important when trying to port anything into the game later. I'm going to use one of my own mods as an example today. As you can see, I imported the dark suit and the scarlet suit. First, I'm going to delete the parts of the scarlet model I don't want. What I like to do is hide the parts I want to keep by pressing H, then deleting everything else by pressing X. Then I'm going to apply the meshes or parts of the model to their respective armature. As you can see, SM1 and 2 are all that's left. I'm going to select one, hit the modifier tab, which is indicated with a wrench. Click the down arrow next to the X, hit apply, and do the same for any other remaining mesh. Then I'm going to delete the armature by selecting it and pressing X. Now you can see the two meshes have been moved to the center origin and are now aligned with the dark suit model. I'm going to select both of my meshes and then right-click the dark suit's armature. Look to the top left and you'll see that you're in object mode. Switch it to pose mode. Hit Ctrl P, then head back into object mode. Move your meshes into the collection. You want to do this by dragging them over the model name that's above the armature. Now that the meshes are in the collection, we can test if our meshes are actually weighted or attached to our model. Click the armature, go into pose mode. Select the bones that would affect the area where your mesh is. In this case, the shoulder and top arm bones. Once selected, hit R to rotate, then hit Y to rotate it on the Y-axis. As you can see, the meshes I added are nicely attached to the arm as they should be. In order to reset the armature back to its original pose, you can hit Ctrl Z, or you can select the whole thing by pressing A, Click on the Pose tab next to View and select. Clear Transform, then hit All. Now I'm going to go over something very important called material slots. Pretty much every model has its own set number of material slots. This dictates what materials the model uses in which specific order. The dark suit, for example, has 17 material slots. However, if I were to add my 2 meshes to this armature, or rig as I like to say, it wouldn't work because the dark suit's rig is set at 17 slots. So I would need to basically use a rig, or armature, that has enough material slots for my model. You can check a model's material slots by using the mesh tool, link in description hopefully. For most of my mods, I like to use the Cyborg model's armature, since, as far as I know, it has the most material slots of any suit, which is 27. However, you can only use about 24 or 25. For whatever reason, any rigs besides the advanced and classic suits, you will lose some slots when converting. I can't use all 27 slots of the Cyborg rig, but that's okay because in this case I only have 19. So the 24 slots I'll have available will be more than enough. Now that we have a basic understanding of material slots, I'm going to import a model that has a rig with enough slots. In this case, I'm going to use the Cyborg model. But before I do that, I'm going to apply all of the dark suit's meshes to their armature, then delete it just like I did with the Scarlet suit. Now we can import our model with enough material slots. Deselect its armature by clicking it, then press X to delete everything except the armature. Do the same method of selecting all your meshes, right? Click the armature. Go into pose mode, P, and hit empty groups. Then drag our meshes into the collection the same way. Now that the meshes are attached to our new big ol' rig, we have to make sure everything is numbered correctly and in order. As you can see, the 2 Scarlet suit meshes I used are also labeled SM01 and 02. I'm going to label them to fit after all the dark suit's meshes, so I'll rename them to SM18 and 19. You can rename them by double-clicking, then press your computer's left arrow key to travel to the beginning of the text. Another thing that's important is to check your mesh's material properties. Scroll down past the modifier wrench, and it should be right above texture properties. Make sure there's only one material assigned to the mesh. If there's more than one, then it will add another slot to your model. Obviously, since we're trying to save as many slots, we don't want that. Now we should be ready to export. Before we do that, I want to go over some useful tips in Blender. You can join meshes by left-shift clicking them, right-clicking, and selecting Join. Note that the mesh that is highlighted will be joined to the one that is yellow. So basically, the yellow highlighted mesh would be the main one. If you want to separate any meshes that have the same material, select them. Go into edit mode, make sure every vertex is selected by pressing A. Then press P and separate by material. If, however, you have a specific part of a mesh that you want to separate, do the same thing, but instead of separating by material, hit separate by loose parts. Note that depending on the complexity of the mesh, it can separate it dozens and dozens of parts. Now back to exporting our model. Use your mouse and drag select over your whole model, including the armature. Hit File, Export, XNALara, XPS, and hit the first option. Make sure you select ASCII, name it whatever you want, and save it someplace you can find it. Now that we have our ASCII, we can use our GUI Wrapper tool to make it a model. This time around, you'll be using the second tab. Hit Browse.ASCII to find the ASCII you just exported. Then for the dot model, since you used the Cyborg armature, or rig, that's the model you'll want to select. Then just hit Convert. Open up the Mesh tool and open the model you just made. Now we need to actually set up and assign our materials to their respective slots. I'm going to open another Mesh tool window and open the dark suit model. Put them side by side. And what we're going to do is copy and paste the materials. You can check which material goes where easily in Blender. Remember that Material Properties tab? That will tell you which material slot from the model it uses. For basic example, the SM00 mesh, we can check and see that the material it uses on the dark suit model is also SM00. So we will simply copy the 0 material path from the dark suit by double-clicking and hitting Ctrl-C, and pasting it in our model's 0 material path. Double-click and Ctrl-V. We'll follow this same logic for the rest of our submeshes. Once that's done, we can hit Save As, and we'll now have a modified dot model. Now I'm going to go over to the good old PC modding tool and find the model I want to replace. In my case, it's the dark suit, which is labeled as the black suit in the tool. Right-click and replace asset. You'll find your modified model and replace the in-game model with that. Hit the Create Mod tab, name it, and create your mod. A useful thing we can do with this tool is test your mods. This helps shorten the time it would take to install all your mods again. So hit the Test Mod tab, and it'll run the game only with the files you just modified. Now that we know how to import and alter suits in-game, we can finally go over textures. So let's say I want to edit the color of a suit. I'm going to use my hooded homemade MCU suit mod as an example now. You'll find a suit's textures right where you found the suit themselves in G00S001. However, we will also need the HD textures, which can be found in G00S015 through 17. The MCU homemade suit is actually named Makeshift in-game, so I'll navigate to where it is. Hit the plus and click on Textures. As you can see, there are a lot of different textures for this model. The letters at the end might be confusing at first, but basically C is your color, or diffuse. G is gloss, and N is your normal maps. Gloss controls how shiny or glossy the texture is, and normal maps essentially use lighting to create a 3D effect. For now, we'll be focusing on the C textures, since all I want to do is change the texture's color. I'm going to right-click the hoodie C texture and extract asset. Now I'm going to scroll down to G00S015, where the Makeshift's HD textures are located. Then extract asset, except this time we will hit extract asset and rename as HD. Another funny little tool we'll need is SpiderTex. Link in description, hopefully. We can use this to turn our texture files into PNGs. Once we have SpiderTex, grab your non-HD texture and drag it over SpiderTex's EXE. Now we have a PNG file of the hoodie texture. You can use the software of your choice. I use Photoshop. Now I'm going to just change the hue and saturation of the hoodie. If your PC uses NVIDIA, make sure you have NVDIA Texture Tools Exporter installed if you're using Photoshop. To save time, I won't go over how to install plugins to Photoshop. Once done recoloring to your liking, go to Save As and hit NVIDIA Texture Tools, Exporter DDS. Make sure the top option is BC7 and set compression quality to normal. Your settings should look something like this. Now hit Save. We'll now have a DDS of our texture. What's a DDS, you ask? It's basically an image file of a game texture. Also note you don't have to use Photoshop. You can use something free like paint.net. Here are the settings to save with for that. With this DDS, we'll need to go and download the Spidey texture scaler. A lot of tools I know, but stay with me here. Link in description, hopefully. Open that up. For import original texture, you want to select the original non-HD texture you extracted before. For choose modded DDS, select the DDS you just saved. The ticker next to Add SD Mipmaps should increase. Click the up arrow as many times as the ticker number says. Then click Generate. Okay, sorry guys, before we continue. In order for the Generate button to actually work, you'll need to choose your modded DDS first, and then import the original non-HD texture. The Generate button should actually be clickable now. Sorry for any confusion, LOL. Now you will have a base and HD texture of whatever you modified. We will now simply head back to the SMPC tool. Head to the base hoodie C texture, for example. Right-click and hit Replace Asset. Replace it with the non-HD texture you just made. Then head to the HD hoodie C texture, or whatever texture you edited. And do the same, except replace it with the HD texture you just made. Now we can create mod and test to see how it looks in-game. Okay, phew, that was a lot, I know. I'm gonna go over a few important things real quick. This is a Google Drive I made with all the necessary things you'll need to run these tools. If for whatever reason you can't access these files or EXEs, you can find most of them by looking through our dedicated SMPC modding server. I recommend joining if you ever have any prying questions. Also, just a disclaimer. Any definitions I gave in the video are simply just my understanding of what was being gone over. If I got anything wrong, feel free to comment below. If there are any errors with the tools or little things I missed, don't worry, this is just part 1 of a very long tutorial. Part 2 will cover suit slots, custom suits, materials, and textures, so be on the lookout for that. I don't think there'll be a part 3, but I'll make one if needed since this is a lot of information. I hope this helped you guys and that it was digestible. Feel free to leave any comments on things you want me to cover or talk about next. And I'll see you guys in part 2. See ya.